"You'll never belong in this family," she said, her voice calm but sharp enough to slice through my chest. Her lipstick didn't even smudge when she smiled after saying it. That was the moment I realized something inside me had snapped. "Hi. My name's Emily, and this is the story of how the woman who tried to break me ended up watching me become everything she ever wanted to be." It started 5 years ago in a tiny coffee shop where I used to work part-time while finishing my degree. That's where I met Ryan. Tall, kind, and quiet, with that look that made you feel like the only person in the room. He ordered the same caramel latte every morning, always left a generous tip, and always smiled like it meant something. One day, he stayed after closing. I was wiping tables exhausted when he asked if I wanted dinner. I laughed, thinking he was joking, but he wasn't. That night, I sat across from him in a dim-lit diner, listening to him talk about his mom. How she raised him after his dad left. How she was strong, opinionated, the kind of woman he admired. I didn't know it then, but she'd become my biggest obstacle. Ryan and I fell fast. The kind of love that makes everything else blur. He brought me flowers he picked from random gardens, wrote sticky notes, drove across town just to walk me home. 6 months later, he said the words, "I want you to meet my mom." I remember spending hours picking out my outfit. Navy dress, small pearl earrings, soft curls. I wanted to look respectable, not flashy. I even baked a pie because Ryan said she liked homemade things. When I arrived at her house, she opened the door, took one look at me, and her smile faltered. "You're Emily?" I nodded, holding the pie like a peace offering. She didn't take it. "I see." Inside, her home felt like a museum. Cold air, glass furniture, spotless floors that seemed allergic to warmth. Ryan looked nervous, but he tried to make small talk. "Mom, Emily made her famous apple pie." She smiled thinly. Oh, how quaint. That word stuck with me. Quaint. Like I was some charity project. Dinner was worse. She asked me where my parents worked, what kind of neighborhood I grew up in, and how much my tuition cost. Every question was a test I didn't know I was failing. Finally, she put down her fork and said, "Ryan, sweetie, you've always had ambition. I just hope the people around you can match that." He changed the subject. I smiled through it, but inside something broke. After that night, she became a shadow over everything. Every time we planned something, she'd call him. Every time he mentioned me, she'd sigh. "Just be careful, Ryan. Some girls see potential and mistake it for love." I tried harder. I dressed better, spoke softer, learned to match her energy. I thought maybe if I proved myself, she'd like me. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. The breaking point came the night Ryan took me to his company's annual gala. It was my first time in a fancy hotel ballroom, surrounded by people who looked like they belonged on magazine covers. I was nervous but proud. He told everyone about me, introduced me as the one. And then she appeared. She was stunning. Silver gown, diamonds, confidence radiating like a halo. Everyone greeted her with admiration. I could see why Ryan worshipped her. She kissed him on the cheek, then looked at me. "Emily," she said sweetly, "you clean up nicely." I hardly recognized you. People laughed lightly. I smiled because that's what you do when you're dying inside. Later that night, when Ryan went to get us drinks, she leaned in and whispered, "You're a lovely girl, but let's be honest. You're not his future. You're just his phase." I froze. My hands went cold. She smiled and walked away. That was the moment. That was when I decided I'd never let anyone make me feel small again. When I got home that night, I sat in front of the mirror and looked at myself. Red eyes, trembling hands, makeup smudged. I whispered, "You're not enough," just to hear what it sounded like. Then I whispered again louder, "Not yet." That night, I made myself a promise. I'd build the life she thought I wasn't worthy of. Not for her approval. Not even for Ryan. For me. I didn't know it then, but that decision would change everything. My career, my relationship, my identity. Because by the time she realized what I'd become, it was too late for her to rewrite the story. The night after that gala, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying her words. "You're not his future." They echoed in my head louder than any music that played that night. Ryan called me the next morning, cheerful as ever. "Mom said she really liked you," he said. I almost laughed. She did. Yeah, she said you're grounded. Grounded. I guess that was her polite way of saying beneath us. Something inside me hardened. That was the day I stopped waiting for her to like me. I didn't break up with Ryan. Not yet. I loved him maybe too much. But I quietly started to rebuild myself from the inside out. I took extra shifts at the coffee shop. I started freelancing on the side, writing blog posts, doing social media for small businesses, anything that paid. Every dollar went into a small, secret account I called Freedom Fund. Ryan didn't know. His mom didn't either. I wasn't planning revenge. Not then. I was planning distance. A few months later, Ryan got promoted. His mom threw a celebration dinner at her house. Of course she did. I helped him pick a suit, but I told him I'd be working late and couldn't make it. He was disappointed, but I didn't care anymore. Because while they toasted champagne in her spotless dining room, I was sitting at a cheap desk, building the first version of my own business. I'd always loved branding, colors, storytelling, helping small businesses look big. So I started M Creative, a small digital agency. Just me, my old laptop, and a second-hand ring light. The first few months were brutal. I'd wake up before sunrise, work until midnight, eat ramen, cry, then keep going. But clients started coming. Small boutiques, bakeries, startups. One client turned into 3, then 5. By the end of the year, I quit the coffee shop. Ryan was supportive, but distracted. His mom had found him a new condo downtown and was helping with furniture. I could feel her fingerprints all over our lives. One night, we went to her house for dinner again. I remember sitting there, exhausted but proud. I'd just signed my biggest client, a cosmetics brand worth more than I'd ever imagined working with. When she asked me what I was doing now, I told her about M Creative. Her smile froze. "Oh, marketing," she said. "That's nice. Everyone's doing that these days, aren't they?" I forced a laugh. She looked at Ryan. "I hope she's not too busy for family dinners." He chuckled awkwardly. I stayed quiet. But that night in the car, I finally asked him, "Ryan, do you ever notice how she talks to me?" He frowned. "She's just protective. Don't take it personally." Protective. That word made me want to scream. Over the next few months, my business grew faster than I could handle. I hired 2 part-timers, got a small office, and started landing bigger brands. I should have been happy. But something else was falling apart as Ryan started canceling plans. He said work was stressful. But I knew. His mom was setting him up with the daughter of one of her business friends. Her name was Chloe. I saw her tagged in his photos. When I confronted him, he said, "You're overreacting. She's just a colleague." But I'd seen the look in his eyes, the same one he once had for me. 2 weeks later, I found the truth. A friend from Ryan's office texted me a picture of him and Chloe at a restaurant. Candlelight. Wine. Her hand over his. And in the background, you could see his mom, smiling. That broke me in a way I didn't think was possible. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation, orchestrated by the same woman who told me I'd never belong. That night, I didn't cry. Not once. I just sat there, phone in hand, staring at the photo. Then I got up, opened my laptop, and started writing. Not to him. Not to her. To myself. A single line. From this moment on, I owe no one an explanation. I deleted his number. Blocked them both. And then I worked. Days blurred into weeks. Weeks into months. My pain became fuel. Every project, every client, every sleepless night, I poured all of it into my work. By the next year, M Creative was featured in a business magazine as one of the top 20 female-led startups to watch. And guess who called me after seeing it? Her. The woman who said I wasn't good enough for her son. She sent me an email that started with, "Hi Emily, I was wondering if you'd be available to consult for my company's rebranding project." I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then I smiled. This was the beginning of my favorite chapter. I wish I could tell you I ignored her email, that I deleted it, laughed, and moved on. But I didn't. Because deep down, I wanted her to see. I wanted her to know exactly who she'd underestimated. So I replied, "Hi, Mrs. Bennett." Thank you for reaching out. I'd be happy to discuss your company's rebranding project. Let's schedule a meeting next week. Emily Carter, CEO, M Creative. That signature, CEO, felt like poetic justice. The meeting was set for Thursday at my office. I cleaned the space like a maniac. Not because I cared what she thought, but because I wanted it to look like the empire she said I'd never build. When she walked in, wearing her usual pearls and that perfume that smelled like old money, I stood up and smiled. "Mrs. Bennett," I said calmly, extending my hand. She hesitated, for just a second, before shaking it. "Emily," she said, scanning the office. "You've done well for yourself." I just smiled. "Yes. Thank you." She sat across from me, placing her designer bag on the table like it owned the place. Then she said something that almost made me laugh. "I had no idea you were this Emily." I saw the article and thought, surely it couldn't be that Emily. I leaned back. Surprise. We went through her company's project, a luxury home brand struggling to connect with younger audiences. She wanted a full rebrand, website, content, visual identity, social campaigns, the whole thing. And she was willing to pay top dollar. As she spoke, I realized something. She needed me. For the first time ever, she was the one asking for approval. Her company's sales were dropping, and her board wanted results fast. She said, "I'd love to work with your team. You've built an impressive business." I nodded, calm and professional. But inside, I was smiling so hard it hurt. Later that day, I told my assistant, "Accept the project. But she gets the standard client treatment. No discounts. No exceptions." I didn't want revenge. I wanted respect. Over the next few weeks, my team and I worked on her project like it was any other. We had weekly meetings, strategy calls, and brand reviews. Every time she visited, she seemed smaller, less sure, more polite. She complimented my ideas, praised my professionalism, even laughed at my jokes. But I never forgot who she was. One afternoon, after a long strategy session, she lingered as the rest of my team left. "Emily," she said softly, "you've really changed." I looked up from my laptop. "I guess success does that." She nodded. "Ryan mentioned you two haven't spoken." I froze. It was the first time his name had come up. She sighed. "He's engaged now. To Chloe." Of course he was. I just said, "Good for them." She studied my face, probably looking for bitterness. There was none left. Just peace. By the time the rebrand launched, her company's image was transformed, sleek, fresh, relevant. It was a hit. Her board praised her for modernizing the brand, though she never once gave me public credit. I didn't care. I had the invoices and the satisfaction. A month later, she invited me to a thank you dinner at a high-end restaurant. I almost said no, but curiosity won. When I arrived, she was already seated, a glass of wine in hand. "Emily," she said, smiling warmly, "you've done wonders for us. I wanted to personally thank you." I nodded. "I'm glad it worked out." She hesitated, then said quietly, "You know, I misjudged you." I raised an eyebrow. "You think so?" "Yes," she said. "I thought you were ordinary." There was a pause. Then she added, "But I see now you're quite extraordinary." For a moment, the younger version of me, the one who cried after her insults, wanted to forgive her. But the woman I'd become just smiled and said, "I was extraordinary back then too. You just couldn't see it." She blinked, taken aback. Then she laughed lightly, the sound brittle and awkward. "Touché," she said. Dinner ended politely. No drama. No apologies. Just quiet acknowledgement. But as I walked out of that restaurant, heels clicking on marble, I realized something. I didn't need her validation anymore. The power she once had over me was gone. Still, part of me wondered how far her son had fallen into her shadow, whether he was truly happy or just performing the life she designed for him. I didn't have to wonder for long, because 3 months later, he walked into my office. It was a Tuesday morning. My team was preparing a client pitch when my assistant buzzed in. "Emily, there's a man here asking to see you. Says it's urgent." I frowned. Did he say his name? There was a pause. "Ryan Bennett." My heart skipped a beat. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. It had been nearly 2 years since I'd last seen him. I told her to send him in. When the door opened, it was like time froze. He looked older, a little thinner, faint lines on his forehead, but his eyes were still the same. For a second, neither of us said a word. Then he smiled, awkwardly. Hey, I kept my voice steady. Ryan. Long time. He nodded, glancing around the office. Wow. You really built something. I did. He laughed softly, like he couldn't believe it. Mom told me you helped with her company's rebrand. She said you were incredible. Glad she thinks so now, I said dryly. He sat down across from me. Can we talk? Just 10 minutes. I hesitated. Then I nodded. 10 minutes. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't even know where to start. Start with why you're here, I said. He looked down. I'm sorry, Emily. For everything. I stayed quiet. He continued. You didn't deserve what happened. You were good to me. To us. I should have stood up for you. I wanted to tell him it was too late. But hearing him say it out loud, it hit different. He went on, I thought my mom knew best. She said you wouldn't fit into our world. That you'd hold me back. I was stupid enough to believe her. He paused, his voice cracking. Turns out, you were the only one pushing me forward. I looked at him, really looked at him. There was no arrogance left, no smug confidence. Just guilt. Ryan, I said quietly, you don't get to come back after breaking someone and act like sorry fixes it. I know, he said. I just needed to tell you. You were right about her. About everything. That line stung more than I expected. He continued, the engagement's off. Chloe, she was just another version of what my mom wanted. I couldn't do it anymore. I crossed my arms. So you walked away? Yeah, he said, nodding. And honestly, I've never felt more lost. For a moment, the silence between us was thick. Part of me wanted to comfort him, the way I used to. But another part remembered the nights I cried myself to sleep while he stayed silent. He looked up. How did you do it? How did you build all this? I smiled faintly, by remembering how it felt to be told I wasn't enough. He nodded slowly like he understood. Then he said something I didn't expect. I miss you. I froze. He leaned forward. I don't expect anything. I just miss you. You were real. Everything else was noise. My heart twisted, but I didn't let it show. You had real, I said softly. You just didn't want it when it wasn't polished enough. He looked down, ashamed. A knock on the door broke the silence. My assistant peeked in. Emily, the 11 a.m. client is here. Thanks, I'll be right there, I said. Ryan stood up. I should go. Yeah, I said quietly. You should. He hesitated by the door. Emily, I hope someday you'll forgive me. I nodded once. Maybe. But not today. When he left, I just stood there, staring at the door he'd walked through. The same door I once thought he'd close on me forever. Now it was me closing it. That night, I got home late. I poured a glass of wine, sat by the window, and let myself feel it. The ache, the pride, the closure I didn't know I needed. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You really showed her, huh? It was from one of Ryan's old friends, Mark, someone who used to tease me for dating above my league. I replied, I didn't show her. I showed myself. He sent back a thumbs-up emoji, and I laughed. For the first time in a long time, the laughter didn't feel forced. A few weeks later, I got invited to speak at a women's entrepreneurship panel, sponsored by a local business association. I almost said no. Public speaking terrified me. But something told me to do it. The day of the event, I arrived early. The room filled up fast. When I walked on stage, my eyes scanned the crowd. And there she was, Mrs. Bennett, sitting in the front row. Her face unreadable. I took a deep breath, smiled, and began. 5 years ago, someone told me I'd never belong. Today, I'm here because I stopped believing them. Her eyes dropped to the floor. After the panel, people came up to shake my hand, take pictures, ask for advice. When the crowd thinned, she approached me. Emily, she said softly, you were incredible up there. Thank you, I said. I'm proud of you, she added. I just looked at her, and for the first time, I saw not a villain, but a woman who'd spent her life performing strength she didn't really have. Mrs. Bennet, I said gently, I hope someday you'll be proud of yourself too. She blinked, speechless, and I walked away. That moment wasn't revenge. It was freedom, because I finally realized I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I already had. After that panel, something shifted. It wasn't fame or attention. It was peace. The kind that doesn't come from applause, but from finally being okay with how the story ended. Except, my story wasn't over yet. 2 months later, I got an unexpected email. Subject line: Speaking Inquiry, Bennett Enterprises Annual Women in Leadership Gala. I thought it was spam. Then I saw who signed it at the bottom. Linda Bennett, event chairwoman. Her. I read the email 3 times. She wanted me, the woman she once humiliated, to headline her company's annual gala. The theme? Resilience and reinvention. I actually laughed out loud. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part of me, the healed part, whispered, "This is your full circle." So I said yes. Not out of spite, but because I wanted to stand in this same room that once made me feel small and show that I didn't need anyone's approval to exist there anymore. The night of the gala, I arrived in a tailored black suit, simple, elegant, powerful. The same venue where, years ago, she told me I wasn't his future. Funny how life brings you back to the same places, just to show how far you've come. As I walked in, heads turned. A few people recognized me from the Business Magazine feature. A woman from the organizing team guided me backstage. "Mrs. Bennett's been telling everyone how excited she is to have you," she said with a smile. I smiled back. Excited? That was one word for it. When I stepped on stage, the lights were blinding. Rows of faces, cameras, elegant dresses, sparkling champagne glasses, and there, right in the front row again, her. She looked proud, even emotional. And sitting beside her was Ryan. He looked different, grounded, maybe even humble. He smiled faintly when our eyes met. But I wasn't there for him. I adjusted the mic. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Emily Carter, and tonight I want to talk about what happens when someone tells you that you're not enough." The room went silent. You could hear the clinking of a glass somewhere in the back. "I've been told that before," I continued. "Not by strangers, but by people who thought they were protecting their own version of perfection. What they didn't realize is that rejection doesn't break you. It builds you, if you let it." I paused, scanning the crowd. She said I wasn't good enough for her son. Now I'm everything she pretended to be: strong, independent, and finally free from needing anyone's approval. There was a sharp inhale from somewhere in the front. I didn't look to see who it was. Applause erupted. Loud. Long reel. After the speech, people surrounded me again. Handshakes, compliments, selfies. Mrs. Bennet approached last, her expression unreadable. "Emily," she said softly, "you were remarkable." "Truly. Thank you," I replied. She hesitated, then said something I never thought I'd hear. "I was wrong about you. Completely wrong." I just looked at her. "I know," I said gently. "But maybe, in some way, you helped me find the best version of myself. So, thank you." Her eyes glistened. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know," I said. "You just didn't believe in me." But I did, eventually. Later that night, as the event ended, Ryan approached me again. He looked nervous. "You were incredible, Em." "Thanks," I said shortly. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I meant what I said before. I'm sorry. I still think about you." I smiled faintly. "I don't think about you anymore, Ryan." His face fell, but I meant it kindly, not cruelly. "You were a chapter," I said softly. "I just kept writing." He nodded, swallowed hard, and walked away. When I got home, I kicked off my heels, poured a drink, and sat on the couch in silence. No tears, no anger. Just quiet satisfaction. For so long, I'd chased validation. From him, from her, from the world that told me I didn't belong. And now, I realized something so simple it almost made me laugh. I never needed to prove I was enough. I just needed to remember that I always was. The next morning, I opened my inbox to find hundreds of messages, people who'd heard the speech, women sharing their own stories of being underestimated. One line from a young woman stood out. "I watched your speech on YouTube. I'm where you were 5 years ago. Thank you for reminding me that I can be enough too." That message made me cry, the good kind. Because it hit me, this wasn't about her anymore. It was about every person who's ever been told they didn't belong. And maybe that was my real revenge, turning pain into purpose. After that gala, my life changed again, this time quietly. Not in some grand movie-like way. Just steadily. People started reaching out. Women, men, college kids, mothers, strangers. They all had their own versions of my story. Someone who told them they weren't enough, someone who made them doubt what they were capable of. And every time I read one of those messages, I realized how many of us carry that same scar, just different names behind it. So I started something new. I called it the Enough Project, a mentorship initiative for young women trying to start businesses, rebuild confidence, or just find direction again after being torn down. I used my experience, every heartbreak, every humiliation, every win, to build something that gave others what I once needed, a hand to hold when you feel lost. We started small. A few workshops in community centers. Then local sponsors joined. Then it grew into full-blown programs, career coaching, business grants, networking events. I wasn't just running a company anymore. I was leading a movement. A journalist once asked me in an interview, "Was all this about revenge?" I smiled and said, "No. It started that way, maybe. But revenge fades. Purpose doesn't." And that's true. Because every time I saw a woman step onto a stage, launch her business, or finally believe she could, I saw the girl I used to be, nervous, insecure, desperate for someone to say she mattered. Now, I was that voice. But healing isn't a straight line. Some nights, I still thought about the girl in the navy dress, holding that pie outside a mansion door. The one who smiled too much and spoke too softly because she didn't want to offend anyone. I'd whisper to her, "You don't need to shrink for anyone. You're allowed to take up space." That's what I wish someone had told me back then. That it's okay to be proud of how far you've come, even if no one claps. One day, out of nowhere, I got a handwritten letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name on the front, written in familiar cursive. Inside it said, "Emily, I've been watching your journey, quietly, from a distance. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope you've found peace. You've become the kind of woman I used to pretend to be. Linda." I sat there for a long time, holding that letter. No anger, no satisfaction, just stillness. Because maybe in her own way she was healing too. That night, I took the letter, folded it carefully, and tucked it inside a journal. Not as a trophy. As proof that even the people who hurt us can change, when they finally see who we really are. A week later, I was invited to speak at a university commencement. It felt surreal, me, the girl who once worked at a coffee shop being told she wasn't good enough, now addressing hundreds of graduates stepping into the world. When I stood at that podium, I looked out at their faces, nervous, hopeful, uncertain, and said, "If someone tells you you're not good enough, thank them. They've just handed you the fuel to prove yourself right." The room erupted in applause. And I realized in that moment, I'd finally outgrown every version of my past. Later, as I was leaving, a student stopped me. She said, "My boyfriend's mom told me I'm not worthy of him." I almost believed her until I watched your speech online. Now I'm focusing on myself. She smiled. "I guess I'm on my own enough journey." I hugged her, because I knew exactly what that felt like. And when I got into my car that night, I whispered, "Good for you." To her. To me. To the woman I became because someone tried to break me. 3 years had passed since that gala. 3 years of peace, of growth, of finally feeling like I'd written the ending myself. Then one afternoon, I was at my office, typing notes from a client meeting, when my assistant knocked softly and said, "Emily, there's someone here to see you." I looked up, and she added, almost uncertainly, "It's Mrs. Bennett." My hands froze over the keyboard. I hadn't seen her since the letter. Part of me thought that chapter was over. But there she was, standing in the doorway, older now, quieter. The same pearl earrings, but a different aura. Softer, maybe humbled. "Hi, Emily," she said. "Do you have a minute?" I gestured toward the chair across from me. "Of course." She sat carefully, like she didn't know where she fit in the room anymore. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," I said. "What brings you here?" She smiled faintly. "You probably won't believe me, but I wanted advice." That caught me off guard. "Advice?" She nodded. "Yes. I've been offered to head a new foundation for women in business. They want me to help lead mentorship programs." She paused, searching my face. "But honestly, I don't think I'm the right person." For the first time ever, her voice wasn't commanding. It was vulnerable. I asked, "Why not?" She sighed. "Because I spent years tearing women down instead of building them up. I don't know how to fix that." Her honesty hit me like a quiet storm. I took a breath. "You start by admitting it." "Which you just did." She nodded, eyes glassy. "You're kinder than I deserve." I smiled slightly. "Maybe. But kindness isn't about who deserves it. It's about who needs it." She exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding that breath for years. "I want to do better," she said softly. "I see what you've done with the Enough Project. It's remarkable. And it's everything I wish I'd had the courage to support before." That moment, something shifted. The bitterness I once carried gone. The fear of her judgment gone. It was just two women sitting across a table, both shaped by pain they'd caused and endured. She looked up again. "Ryan told me you're speaking at the Global Women's Conference next month. I'd like to attend if that's okay." I smiled. "Of course. It's open to everyone." She hesitated. "He's married now. Has a baby girl." I nodded. "Good for him." She smiled faintly. "He named her Emily." That one hit deep. Not because I wanted it, but because it reminded me that maybe, just maybe, we all leave our mark in ways we don't expect. Before leaving, she stood and said, "I used to think power was about control. You taught me it's about grace." I smiled. "You taught me it's about survival. Maybe we both learned something." She laughed lightly, tears in her eyes. Then she hugged me. For the first time ever. It wasn't a reconciliation. It was a release. That evening, I drove home in silence. Sunset painted the sky in gold and crimson, like closure written in color. When I got home, I took out her old letter again, the one where she said I'd become everything she pretended to be. I read it one more time, then tucked it away for good, not as a reminder of the pain, but as proof that people can change, even when they're decades late. Weeks later, I stood backstage at the Global Women's Conference. Hundreds of women filled the hall, founders, CEOs, dreamers. I peeked out and saw her sitting near the front again, clapping for every speaker. When it was my turn, I took the stage. I said, "We spend too much time trying to be enough for people who don't even see their own worth. But when you stop chasing approval, you make room for purpose." The applause that followed wasn't just for me. It was for every woman who'd ever been told she wasn't good enough. And in that crowd, one of them was clapping the hardest. Afterward, I found her outside the hall. She said, "You did it again." I smiled. "So did you." We stood there, two versions of the same story, one written in pain, the other rewritten in power. It was closure at last. After that conference, I thought I'd felt every emotion possible. Hurt, anger, forgiveness, pride. But what came next wasn't emotional at all. It was quiet, like peace finally finding its home. The world around me kept moving. Meetings, deadlines, interviews, speeches, but something in me slowed down. For years, I defined myself by what I overcame. Now, for the first time, I wanted to define myself by what I loved. So, I started living again. I took weekends off, traveled, read books that weren't about business or leadership, tried pottery classes. I even went back to that same little coffee shop where Ryan and I had met years ago. It was different now, new owners, new decor, but the same warm smell of espresso and cinnamon in the air. I ordered a caramel latte, sat by the window, and smiled at the memory of that shy girl behind the counter who once thought her worth depended on someone else's approval. She didn't know it then, but she was already enough. One afternoon, while scrolling through messages from the Enough Project community, I came across a story that made me pause. A young woman named Sophie had written, "My boyfriend's mom told me I wasn't the right kind of woman for him. Instead of proving her wrong, I proved myself right. I started my own business, and last week, she asked me to mentor her niece. Funny how tables turn." I smiled. Her words echoed mine, years ago, but softer, wiser, freer. It made me realize something profound. The goal isn't to prove them wrong. It's to outgrow the need to. That night, I went on a long walk through the city. The streets were glowing with golden lights, the air cool against my skin. I thought about all the versions of me that had existed. The one who begged to be seen. The one who built walls. The one who burned bridges. And the one who finally learned how to build doors instead. We talk so much about becoming stronger after pain, but no one tells you how lonely strength can feel once you've won. Because when you stop fighting, the silence that follows asks, "Who are you now?" That's the question I was finally ready to answer. One morning, I got a call from a publishing house. They'd seen my talks online and wanted me to write a book about resilience. At first, I laughed. Me? Write a book? But then I remembered the hundreds of messages I'd received. All the women still living in that not enough phase of life. So I said yes. It took a year, late nights, rewrites, tears, coffee, but I poured everything into it. Every insult, every lesson, every victory. When it was done, I titled it Enough, The Story of Becoming. The day it launched, it hit the bestseller list. But what mattered more was what happened a few weeks later. I received a photo in the mail. No letter, just a picture. It was Mrs. Bennet, holding my book, smiling. On the cover flap, she'd signed it herself with a note. "For the girl who taught me what real strength looks like. L." I laughed through tears. It felt like life had come full circle, only now the story didn't hurt anymore. Months later, during a book signing, a woman came up to me with trembling hands. She said, "I read your story. It reminded me of my mother-in-law." I smiled. "What happened?" She laughed softly. "She said I wasn't good enough for her son. Now she's my babysitter while I run my own company." We both laughed. Because sometimes, poetic justice doesn't need revenge. It just needs time. That night, after the signing, I went home, sat by the window again, and looked out at the city lights. So much had changed. And yet, the one truth that had stayed with me through it all was this. You can't control how people see you, but you can control what you become in spite of it. I whispered into the quiet room. To the woman who said I wasn't good enough, thank you. Because without her, I might never have learned that the only person I ever needed to be enough for was me. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if she'd liked me from the start. If she'd welcomed me with open arms instead of a measuring gaze. Would I still have become who I am now? The truth is, probably not. Because every version of me that grew stronger did so in her shadow. And the day I stepped out of it, I stopped surviving and started living. But that realization didn't come from success. It came from a mirror. One morning, while getting ready for an interview, I caught my reflection mid-motion. For a second, I didn't recognize myself. The tailored suit. The calm eyes. The quiet confidence. Not because I looked different, but because I finally looked like someone I respected. That was a strange, beautiful moment. Because for so long, I had chased validation from others. Now, I was giving it to myself. The interview that day was with a major network. They wanted to feature me in a documentary about women who turned rejection into power. They asked me to visit places from my past. I said yes. And that's how years later, I found myself standing outside the Bennet house again. It looked smaller than I remembered. The gate, once intimidating, now just ordinary. The manicured garden, the same stone path, even the scent of lavender near the porch. I smiled, remembering the nervous girl with the pie in her hands. She had no idea what life was preparing her for. The crew filmed me walking up the driveway. One of them asked, "What's going through your mind right now?" I thought for a second, then said, "I used to think this house represented everything I wanted. Now I realize, it represented everything I outgrew." Mrs. Bennet came out to greet us. Yes, really. She'd agreed to be part of the segment. We hugged briefly, the cameras catching every second. No bitterness. Just mutual understanding. We sat down on her porch, sipping tea. The interviewer asked, "Do you think you've both forgiven each other?" Mrs. Bennet looked at me and said, "I think forgiveness is what happens when you stop trying to change the past and start being grateful for how it shaped you." I smiled. Exactly. Forgiveness is an agreement. It's release. It was strange, hearing us both speak like that. Years ago, our words were weapons. Now they were bridges. After filming wrapped, she took me aside. "Emily," she said softly, "I watched the way you talk, lead, inspire people. I wish I'd had half your courage when I was your age." I shook my head. "Maybe you did. You just didn't know how to use it yet." She laughed through tears. "You always did see the best in people." "Not always," I said, smiling. "But I'd try." Then she said something that stayed with me. "You became the woman I wanted my son to marry. I just didn't realize you already were." For a second, my throat tightened. Because that sentence, years too late, was the closure I didn't even know I still needed. That night, back in my hotel room, I watched the raw footage. Me and her side by side. Two women who started as enemies, ending as reflections of growth. The younger me wouldn't have believed it. She'd have wanted a louder ending, an apology, a big win, a look at me now moment. But the woman I am today? She just wanted peace. As the sun set outside the window, I caught my reflection again. This time, I whispered, "You made it." Not to prove anyone wrong. Just to finally tell myself the truth. And in that moment, I realized this story was never about her. It was about me finding the strength to become who I was always meant to be. The documentary aired on a Sunday evening. I didn't plan a watch party or make a post about it. I just sat on my couch with a cup of tea, the lights off, and watched my story unfold on screen. There I was, crying in that coffee shop, laughing with my team, standing on stage, sitting beside the woman who once made me feel small. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like closure. The credits rolled over soft piano music. And then came the line that made everything still inside me. "You can't control who breaks you, but you can decide who you'll be when the pieces come back together." After it aired, messages poured in, hundreds, thousands. Some from strangers. Some from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Even Ryan texted, "Watch the documentary. I'm proud of you. You deserve every bit of it." For the first time, I didn't feel anger or nostalgia. Just gratitude. Because even the heartbreaks had served their purpose. I replied simply, "Thank you. Take care of your family." And that was the last time we ever spoke. Months passed. Life moved forward. My book tours ended, the project expanded, and I found myself mentoring young women who reminded me of the girl I used to be. One of them, a soft-spoken intern named Hannah, once asked me, "Were you ever scared you wouldn't make it?" I smiled. Every day. But I kept showing up anyway. Because that's the secret no one tells you. Confidence isn't natural. It's built. One decision at a time, every time you choose not to give up. Years later, I bought a small house on the outskirts of the city. Nothing fancy. Just quiet. There's a garden out back and a lemon tree I planted myself. Sometimes when I water it in the mornings, I think about how strange life is. How pain can plant roots and still grow something beautiful. I still get letters from women all over the world. Each story different, but the message always the same. "I didn't think I was enough until I heard yours." Those words remind me that even our darkest chapters can light the way for someone else. Last month, I was invited to deliver a closing talk at a global summit in New York. The same stage where authors, activists, and leaders I once admired had stood. I walked up, took a deep breath, and said, "Years ago, someone told me I wasn't good enough." She was wrong. But the truth is, I spent years trying to prove it, until I learned that worth doesn't need witnesses. The room went quiet. You could feel it, the kind of silence that holds meaning. I looked out at the crowd, hundreds of faces lit by stage lights, and finished. Don't waste your life convincing people who've already decided not to see you. Go where you're valued, not where you're tolerated. And when you get there, build a table big enough for others to sit at too. The applause was thunderous. Later that night, as I stood outside under the city lights, I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who stood trembling in front of a woman who told her she'd never belong. If she could see me now, I think she'd just smile and whisper, "I told you we'd be okay." I closed my eyes and whispered back, "We did it." Epilogue. I still keep that old letter in my drawer, the one signed L. Not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of transformation. Hers and mine. Because sometimes the people who doubt you are the same ones who end up teaching you what belief really means. And if you're watching this, wondering when it'll be your turn, remember, your worth isn't up for debate. It never was. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Let me know below, and don't forget to follow for more real stories like this.